We're not dead. We're living. That God has given us positions of responsibility that are very important, that are actually key to the foundation that God has designed and established within the family. Very important focuses as He has put together a father in the home, a wife, children, all of these things. They have a very great bearing on how God has designed for His glory to be seen through the relationships of love and obedience that He's brought together in a godly father and a godly mother and godly children. But it's really interesting because we also recognize on the other side of the Word of God, we have a society that is pushing, pulling, desiring to rip apart by self-centered motivations that seem like, and they look like at the time sometimes, that that's the way we ought to go because somehow it's going to bring fulfillment into our lives. And so we see this self-centered focuses that actually come. And society appealing to us in those areas that where we are living by emotions instead of by truth, instead of by facts, instead of by God's design. But we think satisfaction somehow by the world's standards can be somehow met by the world's standards. And that's a very wrong focus. So what we realize is that things that take place today and the fulfillment of those things within our lives are not necessarily a sign that this is the right thing to do or to fulfill or to walk after or to follow after. But we need to realize that satisfaction can never be measured by an immediate result. And if you want to know that, just buy a new car and then put a ding in it. So, a lot of things can happen like that. But what we realize is that, when people think that a one-night stand is going to fulfill them, they think that that immorality is going to fulfill them, and they get a little bit of a thrill for a short minute. And so all of these things come together. Sometimes we think of killing the child in the womb is going to be a fulfillment of giving us back our freedom that we lost because of our sinful nature. We realize that sometimes we can take and buy things on time because it's easy to do. And so all of a sudden we realize that after a little bit of time, we maybe have purchased something that we can't even afford. And all of a sudden we have to turn it back in. And I just heard about somebody that did that with a brand new car. And they went and put it on time because the emotions drove them to do what they knew they should not do. Now, we've all been in that position many times, probably all of us, to where emotions drove us, and then we wish we wouldn't have made the choice that we made after the fact. And so those things happen. And so in the same way, lack of leadership in the home can very well over time reveal the reality where we thought we had it. We didn't have to pick up the leadership. We thought maybe the wife would pick up the leadership. We thought, well, the children can go to church and somehow that leadership will direct their lives and the freedom and all the stuff that we allow. The self-focuses really are a very destructive focus, and we don't always recognize that in the immediate. But over time, it's very clearly revealed that we wish that we would not have gone that direction. Many of us have past. All of us have a past. Some of us have a past that we wish we could relive. And the truth is, we need to make the reality of now the time that we make the change, rather than thinking, oh, I wish I was different back in the past. No, how about today? How about now? Because the now affects the future, and we need to realize the reality of that. And so fathers must choose their goals in leadership. They must choose to be a leader. They must choose what are their focuses as a leader within the family, because they're going to lead in the family, whether they're slothful, lazy. It's going to lead a lot of things in the family. It's going to lead a disaster in a marriage relationship. It's going to lead a disaster probably within the lives of the family, the children, all of these things. So he has to choose. A father must choose to do what he knows he ought to do within the family relationships, in his marriage and in his leadership of the family. So again, society has its goals in leadership, And those goals are to produce, to achieve, to be successful, to advance, to become, somebody of importance, great importance. But the neat thing about God is he has his goals for leadership, not in leadership, for leadership. And it ties to relationships that are going to have a profound effect upon people all around us. Relationships of love, relationships that are produced from a position of responsibility, relationships that are going to bring us into a place of respect, bring us into a place to where we make other people successful, relationships that bring us into a leadership position as a servant leader and humble leader, the person that God is going to use to example the reality of his fatherhood to us, and through us to our wives, our family, children, and those around us. So we want to look at that. So the truth is, the choices that we make daily within our lives actually expose and express our values. And so as people look at us, as children look at us as parents, they say, well, Dad never prays, Dad never reads the Word, Dad never, spends time. Oh, he goes to church. But what's he do? Well, he loves hobbies. He loves the things that he loves to do. He's a hard worker, but he never has any time for us. And so a lot of things take place. They're always pushing in the wrong direction because he thinks that abrogating his responsibilities and giving them to someone else, maybe to the church or maybe to the school or maybe to whatever other things are, maybe just simply to the telephone, the television, all the other things that are out there that are just going to wipe out and affect the mind in a very perverted way. Maybe they'll teach and train. Well, I'll tell you, they will teach and train. If we don't pick up our responsibility as fathers, they will be taught, they will be trained in the ways of the world, in the ways of the things that they put their value upon. And it's going to be a tragic, tragic story. There's lots of examples, but I picked up an example of an inmate that was in high security. And this is what he said. He says, my father was a hard worker, but he had a terrible temper. And he says, I reaped the results of that and the effects of that influence within my life. And now I am in 50 years in prison because of my terrible temper. See, we give over what we are. We don't give over what we're not. And people learn, our children learn. Our wife is a reflection of the reality of our relationship with the Lord and with them. And so it can be a very serious problem. But there are some things that we need to remember. And these are probably things that you already are well familiar with. So don't go to sleep while I'm talking. Okay. So the first one is the relationship of a father to his wife. A father and a mother together in that marriage relationship is a critical relationship, and it directly affects the minds and the attitudes and the values of their children. Very important. And what they do, children will pick up the very same focuses. When I was coaching cross country at Claskina High School, we had a couple there, I call them a couple, because they were kind of dating each other in a rather not a good way. And so a boy and a girl. And so when we take trips on the weekends or on the weeks, Saturdays, to the places that we were running, I would speak to all of the whole crowd, but I would talk to this boy and this girl very seriously. I says, I've talked to the girl, how do you treat your dad? What's your thoughts according to your dad? How do you feel about your dad? You have a good relationship with your dad? Oh, I can't stand the guy. And it was always a negative. And so I asked the boy, and I said, what about you? How do you treat your mother? Do you have a respect for your mother? Do you honor your mother? No, she's just a nag. They go on, and everything was all totally negative. And I just say to them, I said, if you guys continue this relationship that you have and you end up getting married, I said, you're going to end up treating each other just like you see your father and your mother being treated. Just the way you treat them now. A reflection of who they are is going to be pushed right down into the life of those children. And it's just a tragic story. So the first thing, again, relationships of father and mother, critical. Second thing, children left to themselves are a recipe for disaster. Don't think you can allow other things to take and train your children. Other things will take and train your children. Fathers, be responsible to train your children. Be responsible. It says train up a child in the way he should go, which means narrow them into a disciplined way of life. And you can say, well, I just want them to grow up and do what they want. They can make their own choices. I've heard that many times. But they can just make their own choices as they grow up. You know what? They need direction. They need to understand the path that is a path of righteousness, and the path of destruction is on the other side of the issue. They need to know that they can make right choices today that are going to affect their tomorrows. They can make wrong choices today that are going to affect their tomorrows and will permanently mark and stain their life. And we see the results of that over and over and over, especially when you go to a jail or a prison, or or just see children and parents, children totally out of control, have parents having no control, yelling, screaming, I'm going to give you 1, give 2, 3, and they'll just sit there and smile. So it's not the way to train anybody. So children left to themselves are a recipe for disaster. Just some statistics that I picked up. 17-year-olds watch 15,000 hours of television or internet, more than any other activity except their sleep. 46,000 sexual encounters they participated vicariously in rapes, affairs, abuses, in 18,000 murders. They've vicariously participated in those. And it's amazing, when we look at this. And then you think about the children and parents. Everything is texting. The conversations are very little. And so when you see people in the same home, they come together. I had a neighbor that was telling me about how his grandchildren come over, and instead of talking to him, who was a grandpa, they were texting each other on the phone. He said, put the phone away. Talk to each other. You can talk. Well, I don't know how to speak very good. No. Well, that's okay. Maybe you need to learn how to, whatever. So anyway, we see that tragic thing. And then, of course, there's sexting that's tragically going on a lot. It's just terrible. So all these things are terrible focuses. When we think about divorce affects children. We often think, well, I guess it was just the parents need to get divorced so they can have a different path of, a focus or whatever. I should never married her or him in the first place. All kinds of excuses go on and on and on. But 50% of the kids report feeling rejected and abandoned that come from divorced parents. Half of the fathers, after the divorce is finalized, don't even see their kids again. 50% don't even see their kids again. You think, wow, that's amazing. 1/3 fear abandonment that are still in a relationship with the father or the mother, usually the mother, feel abandonment and by the remaining parent. They don't know if they're stabilized or not. They don't know if they're secure. They have no idea. These are just simply statistics that come out that are statistics that are taken on a big range of people. So what we need to realize is a child that is loved and he feels loved by his parents and he's made to feel valuable is a child that's going to begin to develop up into a productive, respectful, healthy, self-confident adult. And the child that is on the opposite end of the field may try to find themselves through the wrong directions, an ability to become self-confident or become a person that's just a vicious tyrant kind of a person, because that builds their confidence in who they are. So the fourth thing, though, the building blocks of a child's rebellion are often the result of a parent's identifying performance as their position of acceptance of the child. They love the child that performs. They just kind of ignore the child that doesn't perform, or they put him down, or they criticize him and says, you'll never become, you'll never become anything. Because, whenever we have this positive and negative attitude, especially a negative attitude, a positive towards maybe one child, a negative attitude towards another child, you see conflict and amazing problems develop out of those comparisons, even in a family when you have comparisons between children. Some produce, some don't produce, so we favor the one that produces. We don't care for the one that doesn't produce. We put extreme pressure upon them. Why can't you be like your sister? Why can't you be like your brother? Why can't you, and it goes on and on and on. We don't realize sometimes the effect that we have upon our children and even upon our wife or husband. And man, we've got to understand we're the ones that make a difference. God tells us to have beautiful wives, and he lays it out in Ephesians 5. So anyway, we need to see that relationships that are based upon performance create a barrier that breaks relationships. So don't ever base everything upon the performance of your kid. In fact, it says to train your child in the way he should go. The way he should go is the bent that God has created and put into his life. So try to look for that bent. And I'm excited to watch my grandkids and my great-grandkids now the bent in some of them is beginning to be seen. And they're being pushed into that bent, not pushed, but allowed to go into that bent and encouraged into the bent that God has created it for them to be in, according to their abilities. And so it's kind of neat not to see everybody put in the same box and say, this is the way you need to be, you need to be like whoever. God doesn't do that. And then, of course, we realize one of the things that we all know about, hypocrisy in the life of the parent is seen very clearly by the kids. In fact, the wife sees the hypocrisy of a husband very quickly, and so all of those things are happening. So you say, well, I have children that are very rebellious. Well, take a look at yourself. What was your effect that caused that? Was there an effect in you that produced some of that thing? And when there is, we need to be humbling ourselves and saying, and going back and just asking forgiveness, saying, I was wrong. Would you forgive me? And begin to create a different pattern of life and style and focus that needs to be implemented into the family. So that is a very serious thing. But one of the things that we need to do, and that is recognize that we're not perfected parents. How many of you are perfected parents? I know that it was mentioned this morning that no, it's already established. You're not perfected. Neither am I, and neither was I. But anyway, I wanted to read this note by permission from Pam, my oldest daughter. And I want us to encourage ourselves, because if we have rebellious kids, don't get discouraged. Pray, cry out, humble yourself, ask forgiveness, whatever is necessary to clean the relationship on your part, and begin to invest life into those kids, compliments into those kids. Pray for those kids, and if they're really in a strained pathway, cry out before God. In fact, it doesn't ever hurt to go to the seriousness of prayer and fasting for your kids. Because I'll tell you something, it shows a genuineness in your heart and your confidence and trust in God to produce a change as you have been producing a change. Your life has been being changed yourself. So here it is, feelings for Dad. This is an 86. Why, oh why can't I show them? My feelings, that is. Why do they have to hurt so bad? He's talking about our feelings. He loves me, talking about me, talking about he loves me, so I know. But oh, how I hurt him so. He says, Pam, I love you, and goes on. But I just cut him off, and then with a sigh say, yeah, I know. When he holds me tight, I pull away. When he reaches out, I shrink as if repulsed. But then behind closed doors, a silent tear glides slowly down my stressed, sad face. Then at night, I sob uncontrollably into my satin pillow. I hurt so bad. I feel I'm going to burst. My heart beats fast when he is near or looks and notices me, hoping he will say something good or just reach out to touch me. I hurt oh so bad I can't show feelings for Dad. I don't know if that's been your experience to have a situation like that in your life to where, but back behind all the facade, behind all the things that are out there that are kind of like a wall, behind the wall, there's something that is crying out for relationship. We need to see that. We need to understand that. We need to go before God and say, God, what is my part in this situation? How can I change? we can pray. We need to pray. We need to fast, whatever is necessary to get serious before God. God is a God that responds to his people in prayer. He responds to prayer. Prayer is a powerful weapon that he uses because it just motivates him, and he's already motivated, but it motivates him. It opens the door for him to begin to work in our lives to change us to where there can be a radical change within the life of our child or our mate or whoever it happens to be. God's heart is so for us. And even like my daughter, look at my daughter today, a godly woman, loving God, radically changed, but going through some really tough things in rebellion. Rebellion is never good. And I just want to encourage you, don't rebel against your parents. I rebelled against my dad. It was tragic. I reaped the results of that for many years and 8 years of marriage. Don't ever come into that position. When God is dealing with you, and God was dealing with me that whole time, but I kept pushing it off, doing my thing, and just kind of trying to ignore it. And yet God finally got a hold of my life. And again, through my grandmother's prayers is one of the biggest things. When she told my wife, she says, I prayed through on John. 2 other cousins, she says, I haven't prayed through on them. I don't know if they're going to make it or not. Well, one of them's already gone and never did make it. But the truth is, she prayed through for me. Pray through for your kids. Don't give up on your kids. And whatever you have to do to humble yourself. I humbled myself before Pam and begged her forgiveness for not being everything that I should have been to her in other things. And so we recognize God operates according to the prayers, the sincere cry of his people. He loves us. He wants to work in our lives. He wants to work in the life of those around us. And again, I just want to encourage you, if you can come on Friday night to pray, come to pray. Come to pray. Come to be prayed for. Come to be ministered to if you need to be ministered to. But let's get together and let's do what we can do to begin to reach a community, to begin to reach our families, to begin to see strong marriages, strong families, all of these things coming together. God has a purpose and plan for all of that. So God has a wonderful promise to those who lead their families. And this is an incredible thing. Turn over to Joshua 1 now. And I want to just start with just go to the second verse. And he's talking, Moses now is dead. He just died. Therefore, now the word comes to Joshua. He says, therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land that I'm giving you, to them, to the children of Israel. Now they're going to go into the promised land. And here it is. And he says, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, have I given you, as I said to Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you. I will not forsake you. Be strong and of good courage. And as he lays this out, he lays out basically 3 different things here. First of all, the land of Canaan was a gift of God to them. It was the final place that they were heading over to, that they were going to. It was the promised land. And I want to say that us as husbands, we have a tremendous promise and gifting given to us in our wives and in our children. Those are promised lands that God has given to us to be able to uphold and to do what we should be doing with them. And so here Joshua is given to 2 to 3 million people to lead over into the promised land. Every father has been given the blessing of leading his wife and his children into the promised land. We are to be totally blessed by the focus of what we do, and we will be blessed by the focus of what we do if we're following that focus as a gift from God and very carefully using it to substantiate his desire and design for that family, for that marriage. And so the beautiful blessings that he designed for us to have out of this thing. And he says, if you would fulfill that purpose that I've given to you, seeing that your wife and your children as very great gifts, blessings of God, if you would do that, then he says you're going to begin you can begin to claim everything in proportion to your faith. In other words, you can claim the Word of God as you put action to what the Word of God says in all family relationships and marriage relationships. He says you can actually claim every area that your foot treads upon, that you put into practice. God will take care of it. The second thing, he says, you're going to conquer all of your enemies. What kind of enemies do we have? I get kind of lazy. I get apathetic. I just kind of push over all my responsibilities to my wife or to the church or to other things instead of picking up my responsibilities. I just kind of push them off. I find myself many times with a lack of purpose. I find myself focusing on self-fulfillment, all kinds of things. These are things that are conquered when I am walking in the steps that God's told me to walk in. He says, go, the land is yours. Every place the sole of your foot treads upon, that have I given you. And he says, you're going to conquer your enemies, all those things that are going to come against you, all those things that society throws out there. He says, you're going to conquer those things, and you're going to be in full of victory in all of those relationships. And then the third thing, he says, you're going to experience continual, unbroken presence and rest. The presence of God and the rest of God. You're going to find out, you're going to come into a place to where you're going to be, it's going to be a workout sometimes. It's going to be, you say, well, difficult things. Yeah, it's going to cost you. You're going to sacrifice. But it's the best thing that we could possibly do, because we're going to get rid of all that stuff out there that gives us the wrong priorities in this world. And we're all of a sudden going to find ourselves walking in God's priorities. And as we walk in God's priorities by faith, He's empowering us to fulfill His purposes in that whole focus. Tremendous thing. And so then he lays out in verse 6, he says, again, and he gives this word, he says, be strong and of good courage. Now he's not telling you with a board, with a 2x4 over your head. He's saying, okay, be strong and good courage. If you're not, boom. He's not doing that. He's telling you, be strong. He said, I'm encouraging you. I'm behind you. I'm empowering you. I'm doing all these things to give you that ability to be the husband that you ought to be the father that you ought to be. Be strong and good courage. Put your confidence in me. That's what he says. For this people, he says, you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. He swore to the fathers. The fathers had no faith. They were all lost. They all died in the wilderness. It was the children that they were all concerned about that went into the promised land. And what we recognize is God says, you're going to divide the inheritance. You're going to have the inheritance that I promised. And he says, you're going to find yourself in a position of absolute victory. I love what Steve Barries always says. Victory in Jesus. Victory in Jesus. That's where it is. Victory in Jesus. And so he says, you're going to divide it, which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law, which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. And then he says, this book of the law, this word of God, shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong. Have good courage. Do not be afraid. Don't be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Oh, we got reasons for getting dismayed sometimes. We got reasons for being afraid. We got a world against us. We got a Satan against us. Sometimes we're against ourselves. And God is saying, what are you doing? I'm not against you. I'm for you in every way. Wow. So he's telling you, be strong and of good courage. What's he saying? He says, no, he's not doing it with the 2x4. He's saying, I'm leading you. I'm guiding you. I'm empowering you. I'm equipping you. I'm developing you. I'm maturing you. I'm motivating you. It's all about him. And when we put the focus upon him, then we find something supernatural taking place that's way beyond our ability to pull off a result. This is just simply walking by faith. So how does this happen? Turn over to Deuteronomy 6, and it just comes back and it stabilizes this focus in Deuteronomy 6, and it's just a simple focus, and it gives us the key to what is going to cause this to happen within our life. Where we're going to have territory, we're going to take territory, we're going to find ourselves walking in a position of victory, walking with the faithful God. Well, what he says here in verse 5, Deuteronomy 6, verse 5, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Interesting. Isn't that hard? Love God that loves you. Love the God that gave his life for you. Love the God that took all of your punishment, took all of your condemnation upon himself. Love the God. Oh, that's so hard. No, not when you know him, not when you've experienced his change in your life. Then all of a sudden you're going to say, wow, the very most wonderful thing that can possibly happen to me is to submit my life to the Lordship of Jesus Christ and to walk in that relationship to where I'm fulfilling my God-given responsibilities, which is to love my wife, to love my kids, to teach, to train, to invest my time, not in my selfish focuses, but in his design for me as a father. And all of a sudden we find ourselves in a position of purpose, in a position of fulfillment, in a position that is just incredible. And we think, wow, this is an impossible thing. You know, when you look back on things, you know, I look back on our life together. And I look back at the time when I was rebellious, and I look back at the time when God got a hold of my life and I repented. I look back now at the time when things radically changed within my life, within our family life, and things got put back in order. And then I see the things that took place with Pam. I see that and that radical change that happened there as I humbled myself again before her, before the things that happened at that time. And then to see the radical change that happens within my family relationships, I look back and I think about my dad, who is flawed, just like all of us, but faithful. I look back and I see, and then I look back at his mother that prayed for me. And I look back and I see, you know, time after time after time, all the way down through all the ages, all the different things that took place as people were faithful to God, and the faithfulness now is being displayed by the grandkids, by the great grandkids. I'll tell you, it's an incredible thing because you know how flawed we are. You are. I know how flawed I am. And yet God, taking that faith that we have in him to produce something, takes and does a supernatural work. And we just sit there, God, how can you do it? How could you do that? We reap the results, and we thank God for those tremendous results. So he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And then he says, and these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. In other words, it's your life. The words, now you're changed, you're being changed, you're going to be a godly person, God's working in you. It shall be in your heart. You shall teach them the things that you're learning is what you're going to be teaching. The things that you're putting application to is the very things that you're going to be teaching diligently to your children. You're going to talk of them when you sit in the house. Why? Because that's your life. Your life has been radically changed. Why do you talk about God? Why do you talk about the ways of God? Why do you talk about the mentality of just having the character of God? Why would you even talk about that kind of stuff? Why do you talk about what God is doing in your life? Why would you witness? You shall teach them diligently to your children. You'll talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. Why? Because it's your life. You're going to bind them as a sign on your hand. Wow. And they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. The phylacteries on the eyes, all the scriptures that were actually represented in that little box up there between the eyes on the forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. In other words, the word of God is continually before you, always. And so what we realize is that we have a choice. And if the father's life is based on loving God, guess what the natural follow-up, the most natural follow-up is that children are going to be people that are going to desire over time as they're growing up. They're going to grow up with that desire to know God. They're going to grow up with that desire that my dad, my mom, they are loving each other. They love God, and I want that same relationship. They're going to grow up in that atmosphere of love, God's love permeating their lives. Now, look, it doesn't mean that every child is never going to rebel, but it does mean that God's power is more powerful than the power of the world, the power of the devil, and all those things. even if they make wrong choices, which probably they will at different times. But it means that I will never quit loving them. I'll never quit praying for them. I'll never quit putting my confidence and my trust in God to turn the heart of the child to Him in that way. So, what we need to realize is that we have the opportunity as fathers to bless or to ignore. We can bless. We can bless with our mouth. We can bless with the focuses of our life. We can bless by just the example that we're living out. We can bless by that servant's heart. We can bless, or we can ignore it. Say, I don't need a servant's heart. I'm just going to, I'm not going to love my wife. I'm not going to show any affection. I'm not going to, teach, train, whatever. We can bless or we can ignore, and we always reap what we sow. It's going to be the natural thing. So nothing becomes dynamic in our life until we become specific. And that means specifically making specific choices to invest my life into my wife, to invest my life into my children, to invest my life in whatever I'm doing for the glory of God. It says, whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Work, play, eating, whatever you're doing, do it to the glory of God. That's a wonderful blessing. So it has to be intentional, though. It's not going to just happen automatically. It has to be intentional. I have to choose today. Turn over to Ephesians 5. In Ephesians 5, of course, we have this focus on marriage. But I like this because what it tells us is the role of a husband here in verse 25. It says, husbands, love your wife, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Did he live for his own pleasures? Did he live for his own glory? Did he live to become somebody? Did he live to become wealthy and healthy and all the other things that we can think about that we try to strive for in order to be somebody? He didn't live for that. He didn't live for money. He didn't live for wealth. He didn't live for fame. He didn't live for all of the stuff that we sometimes look at and think this is going to be the thing that fulfills me. He didn't live for that. He lived for the glory of God. And his whole focus was a different focus than what we actually look at so many times. He says, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. Gave himself for her. Wow, this is an amazing thing. So realizing, again, that marriages and godly children don't just happen. Godly marriages and godly children just don't happen. And so we have to come back to where in the world we were at before we got married. Did you have a passion? Probably. That passion probably drove you into a relationship. And that relationship is amazing because it drove you into a marriage relationship. And then what happened? How come we don't have the same passion that we had before marriage to continue the marriage relationship, building that quality of relationship after the marriage? In other words, we start taking each other for granted, which is okay to a point where we live with the faith because of the faithfulness of our mate. That's one blessing. But when we just kind of lose it all and just say, well, I'm just going to take it for granted, they're going to serve me. All of a sudden, our interest, instead of being on that other person, turn inward and we become interested in what they can do for me rather than what I can do for them. It used to be, before we were married, probably, I hope this is true of you, that you had a hunger to be a blessing to that other person over there you thought was perfected. When you got married, you realize I've married a sinner. And so the commonness of the relationship over time begins to focus in on things. Financial pressures come to pass. Sometimes physical situations come to pass. Sometimes there's a lot of differences between male and female. There's a lot of differences in family differences sometimes, giftings, raising children. And so our response to these situations that come into our life are clearly picked up by our mate and by our children. They see how you respond. They see how you react. They see how you get upset. They see your anger. They see how you storm out of the house. Or they see how you love. They see how you humble yourself. They see how you serve. They see how you are a witness to your wife children observing a marriage relationship like this are totally affected by that beauty of that focus of love, true love, laying down a life, just like it's talking about here. Love your wives, just as Christ loved the church. And then it says that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word. That is the reason that I continue to, maybe I'll call it harp, say, if you're a father, lead your family. Get into the word. Just read the word together. Talk about things. Make it simple. Pray together daily, every day. Do it. And what you're going to find is what happened to me, I began to grow up. I began to become a man. I began to realize I'm not a wimp. I don't have to be a wimp. I don't have to be led around by the nose by my wife. I don't have to. I can lead. I can guide. I can direct. I can love. I can submit. I can do all those things that are critical in a marriage relationship. That makes it a very successful relationship. And God is in the whole focus. So, our pattern of life is clearly seen by our wife, by our children, is clearly seen. Our love, our sacrifice, our conversations, what we put value upon, how we spend our time, how we spend our money, the things that we live for, it's all clearly seen. You can't hide it. Our example, the most powerful teacher that we can have. That's why, what is the truth about my life in Christ? What is the truth? You know, men must become servant leaders if they're going to have a healthy relationship in a family, in a marriage relationship. Not wimps. Servant leaders, not dictators, for goodness sakes. We think sometimes, well, I'm the chief around here. She's got to submit to me. You know, that's such a phony focus. When we lived before we got married, we didn't have that focus. Why do we have it now? All of a sudden, I'm the big chief, all of a sudden? No, I thought she was a wonderful thing. I thought she was the most precious thing. That's why I got married to her in the first place. Now it's no big... You know, if you don't work on a relationship, it's just like what happens in your yard. Evolution shows the truth. Everything gets worse. Weeds grow all over the place. The lawn looks terrible. Everything is infected by, whatever. It's just a mess. It's a disaster. Your marriage becomes like that when there's no action put to the marriage relationship. God knows that. He wants us to understand what he is telling us here is that we need to walk in a path that he's already prepared for us to walk in, that guarantees victory, that guarantees success, that guarantees that every place I put my foot down as a humble person and walk in servant leadership is going to be a blessing and turn into becoming a spring of blessing for the family, for me, for everybody, for the wife. So when we realize, how does a servant being a leader work together? Well, all you have to do is see the example of Jesus Christ. He was God. He came from heaven in equality, and he didn't have to grab a hold of that and say, I got to hang on to my equality. I'm God. I got to hang on to that equality. No, he humbled himself. He submitted himself to his Father, and he lived by faith according to the will of his Father. He did that. And as he did that, he came down here in the flesh, became a man in the flesh. He humbled himself. He submitted himself even to all the things that were going on, to the persecution, to the things that were negative, until the point that he gave his life because he had one goal in mind, and that was to bring man back into a position of redemption. If we could have that kind of a focus in our marriages, wouldn't that be interesting? Because if we lived for the benefit of the other person, if we were willing to die for the benefit of the other person, if we're willing to die for the benefit of our children, we say, well, I would die for my wife, I would die for my children, but I'm certainly not going to wash the dishes. I'm certainly not going to take time to train and teach and train my kids. I'm certainly not going to take time to be in the Word with my family every single day of my life. I'm certainly not going to take, and when we choose to go the wrong direction, the easy path, it says the way is broad, it's easy, everybody's doing it, why not just go along with everybody else? No, don't do that. Take the narrow, take the way of God's will, God's word. Take the word of God and put application into your life and live it out empowered not by your will to do it. Empowered by the fact that you've been changed and the love of Jesus is penetrating your life, and you do everything like Paul says, the love of God compels me to do what I do. When the love of God is the focus of life, I'll tell you something, it's no longer a terrible thing to follow the will of the Lord. In fact, it feels terrible to go the other direction. And that's what we need. So God is the perfect leader. And he says in Matthew 20:28, the Son of Man did not come to serve, but he came to give his life a ransom for many. In other words, he provided the strength of leadership. He provided the proper love, and his strength of leadership combined with his love permeated everything that he did in his leadership. And the same thing with husbands. When we are in that position to where we are leading and with the focus of loving, giving our life, expending our time, expending our life, expending whatever it is for the sake of benefiting and building up our wife and our children in the love of God, it's going to make a huge, massive difference in everything that we do. Strong leadership. So, I want to read this little passage here. It says, Larry and Joanne were an ordinary couple. They lived in an ordinary house on an ordinary street. Like any other ordinary couple, they struggled to make ends meet and to do the right things for their children. They were ordinary in yet another way. They had squabbles. Much of their conversation concerned what was wrong in their marriage and who was to blame, until one day when a most extraordinary event took place. Quote, you know, Joanne, I've got a magic chest of drawers. Every time I open my drawers, they're full of socks and underwear, Larry said. I want to thank you for filling them all these years. Joanne stared at her husband over the top of her glasses. What do you want, Larry? Nothing. I just want you to know that I appreciate those magic drawers. Well, this wasn't the first time Larry had done something odd, so Joanne just kind of pushed the incident out of her mind until a few days later. Now, quote, Joanne, thank you for recording so many correct check numbers in the ledger this month. You put down the right numbers 15 out of 16 times. That's a record. Disbelieving what she had heard, Joanne looked up from her mending. Larry, you're always complaining about my recording the wrong check numbers. Why stop now? Oh, no reason. I just wanted you to know I appreciate the effort you're making. So Joanne shook her head and went back to her mending. What's gotten into him? She mumbled to herself. Nevertheless, the next day when Joanne wrote a check at the grocery store, she glanced at her checkbook to confirm that she had put down the right check number. Now, why do I suddenly care about those dumb check numbers, she asked herself. She tried to disregard the incident, but Larry's strange behavior intensified. Joanne, that was a great dinner, he said one evening. I appreciate all your effort. In the past 15 years, I bet you fixed over 14,000 meals for me and the kids. Well, then, wow, Joanne, the house looks spiffy. You really worked hard to get it looking so good. And even thanks, Joanne, for just being you. I really enjoy your company. Joanne was growing worried. Where's the sarcasm? Where's the criticism, she wondered. Her fears that somehow something peculiar was happening to her husband were confirmed by her 16-year-old Shelley, who complained, Dan's gone bonkers, Mom. He just told me I look nice. Even though I'm wearing all this makeup and all these sloppy clothes, he still said it. That's not Dad, Mom. What's wrong with him? Whatever is wrong, Larry didn't get over it. Day in and day out, he continued focusing on the positive. Over the weeks, Joanne grew more accustomed to her mate's unusual behavior and occasionally even gave him a grudging thank you. She prided herself on taking it all in stride, until one day something so peculiar happened that she became completely discombobulated. I want to take a break, Larry said. I'm going to do the dishes, so please take your hands off that frying pan and leave the kitchen. Long, long pause. Thank you, Larry. Thank you very much. Joanne's step now seemed a little lighter, her self-confidence higher, and once in a while she hummed. She didn't seem to have as many blue moods anymore. I rather like Larry's new behavior, she thought. That would be the end of the story, except one day another most extraordinary event took place. This time it was Joanne who spoke. Larry, she said, I want to thank you for going to work and providing for us all these years. I don't think I've ever told you how much I appreciate it. No matter how hard Joanne pushed for an answer, Larry never revealed the reason for his dramatic change in behavior, and so it will be likely remain one of life's mysteries. But it's one I'm thankful to live with. You see, I am Joanne. Change, is it possible? Very possible. With God, all things are possible. Without Him, failure. And I want to encourage us here today to pick up the mantle of leadership, fellas, that God has given to us. We are game changers. We are marriage changers. We are children changers. We are changers. We are life changers that God has given to us, this ability to be a life changer in the lives of those that are all around us. And as we see our family changing, guess what? The influence just continues to spread. It's like ripples in a pond. You throw a little pond out there, a little pebble out there, and it got a ripple, and it goes out and out. But this is what happens when there's bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger ripples. God uses by people that are committed to His Word, that are committed to leading and guiding and protecting and submitting and humbling themselves before those around them until they are put in a position of great influence that God has designed would take place in the family. God has designed the family to be that example, that marriage relationship, the example of Christ to the church. And I'll tell you something, when we begin to realize that, we realize we come back to Joshua 24, 14, and 15. It just says, the choice is ours. Joshua is speaking to the children of Israel now, and he challenges them as they're coming into the promised land, to make this commitment to the Lord. And he says, choose you this day whom you will serve. Choose you this day. And I'm challenging all of us fellows again. And I know we've probably chosen this many, many times. I've chosen. Choose today again. Choose again tomorrow. Choose the next day, all the way through the end of your life. Choose you this day whom you're going to serve. Get your focus off of the performance focus of your mate, your children, whatever else is out there. Get it on the Lord. Put your focus on that. Choose whom you're going to serve today. Walk in a relationship of love and obedience before God, and God empowers us, every single one of us, men, to become not wimps, but powerful soldiers of Jesus Christ, leaders, guiding and directing the focuses of our family, working together in submission with our wife, all of these things working together, complementing, not competing, but blessing. Choose you this day whom you will serve. Joshua made this commitment, and I'm praying today that this is our commitment, every one of us fellows here. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It didn't say, as for me, now I'm going to put the responsibility on my wife. We're going to serve the Lord. No. As for me and my house, the responsibility to the man, we're going to serve the Lord.